Welcome everybody. Today is Thursday of Parshas YISRO. In our Parsha, there's a lot of fantastic and exciting things. And today's class is all really about how are we, as individuals, going to experience the world and the blessings that we have around us. We're going to start with with the opening words of one of the most central talks that the Rebbe has ever given. From that verse, which is from Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs, we'll move into a conversation about how do we look at a world which is so upside down? How do we experience a world with so many crazy things happening in it? Just think about what happened last Shabbos. If you're not on Facebook and you're not on social media, you may not know about what happened in Corryville, Texas, and thank God it ended okay, but that's stressful. And we can think about the things that happen in the world and just get overwhelmed with pressures and anxieties. Is that the focus that we want to go with? We're going to go from there. We'll talk about the experience of Jethro in converting. We'll look at conversion with a small glimpse of conversion, but really we're going to look at what's before, what's after. We're going to focus on what happens in between, and then we'll close with an entirely new vista of what the experience of the world is like. Okay, gear up, get your seatbelts on, rev up the engines. So, last week was the 10th day of Shvat. 10th day of Shvat is the day that the Rebbe assumes leadership back in 1951. And it's on that day that he says his first ever mimer. Mimer is it's part of the Hasidic jargon. So I'm going to translate the term. Mimer means mimer. There's no way to translate it. Okay, what is it? It's a intensely esoteric thesis delivered in speech or written, and studied over for years to come. How's that? Well, the previous Rebbe, when before he passed away, he left a series of 4 mimers, plural mimarim. He left 4 of them to be studied on 4 occasions. No one knew that he was going to pass away. They were set for the day he passed away, 3 days later, a month later on Purim, and a month after that, right before Passover. Well, the Rebbe, our Rebbe, took this series of Maimorim, of teachings, and he said, if this is the last lessons that the previous Rebbe taught, this is going to be viewed as the ultimate will and testament, call it, of the previous Rebbe, which means it's also going to be the foundation of the Rebbe's leadership and his method and style. And it was. So our opening words, as well as the date of the rest of the conversation, was said on one of those days, remembering the transition from previous Rebbe to current Rebbe, and it uses the same words. Okay, what are the words? Open up your books, section A, It's a Beautiful World, source number 1, and let's ask Alan, please, will you honor us with source number 1? I think it's 4 sentences.
I have come to my garden, my sister, my bride. Songs of Songs 5-1. The Midrash notes it doesn't say garden, rather it says my garden. In other words, to my home, to my abode, to the place where I once resided, for in the beginning God's essence was found in this world.
Thank you, Alan. So the words of the verse in Song of Songs, I've come to my garden. Who's coming to my garden? Who's going where? What is the Song of Songs? So
Can
a
you bring
little
it up,
introduction. Just a moment. The Song of Songs is an expression of love between groom and bride in a very unique way. More than an expression of love, underneath it all, King Solomon writes the Song of Songs as a relationship between Jew and God Almighty. And that is how all of the teachers have viewed the Song of Songs for years, for generations. In this relationship song, God says, I have come to my garden looking for you guys. And so this becomes a discussion. But in the quote that we just used, we're going to focus on one word. Does it say the garden, or does it say someone's garden? God says it's my garden. What is the garden? What is my garden? We wonder. The understanding is, as we can see in the coming words, to my garden means to the place where I once resided, for in the beginning God's essence was found in this world. This is like a major topic which could last for hours, and we don't have the time. The general idea is that God creates the world and wants to be in here, and so he makes a world where he first is, but then because of experiences, the sins of Adam, the sins of the nations, of the people around Noah, and in between, and the Tower of Babel, etc., all of these moments, God removes his presence from the world, step by step by step. The discussion on this continues and teaches us that as each righteous person, starting from Abraham and moving forward all the way to Moses, each one of them brought more presence of God into the world. So looking at it like that, looking at the world as God's garden, we have a really strong issue to deal with, and that is the Rebbe, humankind, the world is a jungle. So let's ask Professor Blumenthal, give us humankind, the world is a jungle.
When you look around at the materialism and the coarseness of the physical world which surrounds you, you might become anxious and afraid. What is happening to the world? Things seem to deteriorate from generation to generation and from year to year. Goodness and holiness don't seem to be gaining the upper hand. The opposite seems to be the case. This is especially true regarding the state of the Jewish people, who were always the smallest among the nations. The situation doesn't seem to be getting better. From a rational perspective, we could make the mistake of seeing the world as a jungle, where wild beasts rule the landscape. It doesn't seem to be an orchard, a positive place which produces delicious fruit for human consumption. You could easily become discouraged and indifferent. What hope is there to make a difference, you'll think, when the situation seems to get worse from generation to generation and from year to year?
Thank you, Reb Shmuel. So the Rebbe has this like very uncharacteristic statement. You won't hear this kind of talk from the Rebbe typically. It just doesn't fit. It's like, the world is bad, the world is troubled, like look at it, what's going on. All of these kind of ideas, it's unusual from the Rebbe. The Rebbe is introducing a new position. I had a conversation today with someone, and he's telling me how the world is falling apart. He's trying to tell me, he's trying to express that, like, look at what's happening. Forget the political polarization. What about all of the inhumanities and atrocities that happen in different countries and under different regimes? This stuff is crazy. How can we manage here? How can we exist here? How can we continue? And that's what the coming paragraphs and tonight's conversation is all about. Yaakov, can you read for us, please? God, the world is my orchard.
If it's on the screen.
If it's on the screen. Oh, you make it tough. Okay, Juan, I'm going to appoint you to read the world is my orchard.
It says, of the previous Rebbe is in the scriptures address this very point. The previous Rebbe himself underwent the most difficult situation. He experienced all four categories of suffering for which a person must thank God upon survival. Even when he finally arrived in a safe haven, I don't know, where he has no longer under threat, he suffered both spiritually and physically. There is no need to dwell on it at length. Nonetheless, he taught his most amazing teaching in the day and year which followed. I have come to my garden, the world which he lived in, despite its external appearance, was a garden, not a field which produced sustenance, but a garden which produced fruit. It's not just any one garden. It isn't owned by someone who is not particular of its quality. It's a garden on which Hashem say that it's my garden. It is Hashem garden and orchard. And it's not only his temporary possession. It is his home, the place where he deepest essence is most comfortable.
Look at that. Look at how this is. The Rebbe makes a point that the previous Rebbe went through a lot of suffering. Just to give you a little historical context, the previous Rebbe comes to America in 1930. Is that correct? 1940. I made a mistake. 1940. He's coming from Russia, right? Coming from St. Petersburg, I think, where in 1929, I guess, he was arrested for the 11th time for spreading Judaism under the Lenin communism. I don't think it was Stalin at the time. And the KGB, the NKVD at the time, beat him ruthlessly, close to murder, and it was a terrible experience, all for the crime of teaching Torah. You would think that a couple years later, when the Rebbe is finally able to come to America, to the land of the free, where everyone is able to practice any religion as they wish, constitutionally, you would think that the Rebbe would be warmly welcomed and encouraged to continue his good work. Or you'd think that maybe he would take a vacation. Like, the big fight is over, he's not in Russia anymore, what's he going to do now? Like, go to sleep, take a break. When the Rebbe turns up in America, it's completely different. 1940, and everybody's telling him, Rebbe, America is different. You can't go around with a fur hat and long payas in America. You can't wear the long Hasidic jacket in America. It's different here. It's not the same. And to this the Rebbe responds, America is not different at all. I will not go to sleep until we have an extension, a continuation of the Chabad yeshiva that existed in Russia. We're going to have it here in New York. And true to be said, that night was the first session of studies, and they had, I think, 10 students, like from the younger guys, who said, we're in, we want it, we're joining. And that night there was already a continuation of the movement. But thinking about this Rebbe, coming from where he's coming, with all of the suffering, who else could say this place is terrible? I can't handle it. But instead, his magnum opus, his final speech, His biggest lesson is, come to my garden. The world is a garden, and it's our job to experience the garden that we're in. It's not just any garden, it's my garden. It's God's garden. And really, the point here really is, how are we, as individuals, as consumers of the world, going to look at everything around us? Do we look at the world as terrible? Or will we allow ourselves to look at the world as an overwhelming blessing? Yaakov, I'm going to share the document onto the screen so you can see it. And please, give us when you want, you see.
Okay. Regardless of whether or not you understand it, you can connect with this truth, knowing that it is stated in the Torah of truth, as transmitted in his teachings right before his passing. And it gives you the ability to look at the world with a different perspective. With this newfound attitude, you will notice things that you wouldn't have noticed at first glance when you were looking superficially. Now you will know what to look for, and you will look in that direction. You will look to uncover that which is hiding under the external shell, the fruits of the garden. When you search with this attitude, you can, first of all, be assured that you will find what you're looking for, being that the Torah of truth declares that it is so. Can you scroll the page up or down? All right. Secondly, in your confidence that you will find precious treasures, fruits to which God attests that they are from his garden and abode, you won't be afraid of hard work, and difficulties won't cause you to be sidetracked by other affairs, because you know that a precious treasure awaits you. The opportunity to reveal how this world is God's garden, the opportunity to reveal that God's essence is in this world. So when you go out into the world and you ask what's going on, and you hear only bad news, don't be discouraged. Don't question your ability to fulfill your mission. And you need to scroll up. Remember that this reality exists only among those who look at the world with eyes of flesh and blood, but those who follow the verse, raise your eyes to the heaven and see who created these. They first look up to the heavens and recognize that the world is God's garden and orchard, God's abode.
Awesome, Yaakov. Thank you. There is a classic story. Classic story. Two people are mining a mountain, and their job is to haul the heavy load from the bottom of the pit all the way to the top, to the dude, whatever, to the guy, to the collectors. One of them is like struggling. It's a heavy load. I don't know how many hundreds of pounds. And he's got it on his back in the sack, and he's climbing, he's huffing and puffing, and he's schwitzing, and he's grumpy. Look how hard I have to work to make a buck. But the other guy is skipping up the mountain. Compare the physical abilities, and the skipper it doesn't work out as much as the other fellow. When they get to the top, the slow-paced schlepper says to the skipper, "What's the deal? How did you manage to carry so much heavyweight stuff all the way up that mountain so easy?" Says the skipper back, he responds, "Listen, the bag is not full of stones, it's full of diamonds. When I know the value of what I'm bringing home, it's so much easier to move up the mountain. There's a lot more enjoyment in it." In the text that we just read, there's two kinds of people. There can be two kinds of people. One person looks at the world and he says, "This place is horrific. It is falling apart." The other guy looks around and says, "This place is a garden. Look how many blessings there are. Look how fortunate I am. Look at all the goodness that I've got." Two very different perspectives. Sometimes it actually looks rough, and the skipper the lightweight, still is enjoying it. So we've got to take it on ourselves, I guess, to look for the goodness, to search for the goodness. So that's section A. But now we move into the connection to our parsha. So right before we move into the connection to our parsha, I want to open up, if anyone has a comment, a question, a solution, or an issue, and now is the time to say it, or forever hold your peace. Okay, anyone? No one's brave enough to say something? Okay, next. Okay, a world of suffering, section 2. Who is Moses' father-in-law? Jethro. In Hebrew, like the Torah says it, YISRO. What is YISRO famous for? The Torah recounts that when the Jews got out of Egypt, crossed the sea, fought Amalek, arrived at Mount Sinai, YISRO turns up. And everyone wants to know, like, what's he doing here? Why is he coming? The Torah teaches us that he's come to convert. Jethro, effectively, YISRO is the first convert to Judaism. But in his arrival, the commentaries wonder, what is it that made him come? Exactly what made him come is not the topic of tonight. But what we do notice is that Jethro turns up in the best of situations, when the Jews are at the top of the mountain, so to say. So the Talmud responds to Jethro, or learns from this experience, and says that if a person ever wants to convert to Judaism, what is our first approach to him? We push him away. We tell him, life as a Jew is tough. It's rough. It's hard. It's horrendous. People are always persecuting us. Pogroms, Holocaust, crusades. Why would you want this? I mean, Collierville. Like, so much. Why would you come along? So let's go source number 2, the verse, source number 3, the question, and then I think it should be source number 4 is how do we deal with a possible convert. So let's start, Michael. Let me share the screen for you, Michael, so you can read along. Is that the right screen? Yes, it is. Okay, Michael, give us source number 2 and 3.
Moses' father-in-law, Jethro, the chieftain of Madon, heard all that God had done for Moses and for Israel, his people, that the Lord had taken Israel out of Egypt. Moses' father-in-law, Jethro, the chieftain of Madon, heard all that God had done for Moses. What did he hear that made him come and convert?
Awesome. Okay, so there you go. Source 2 through source 3. He comes. Why did he come? Why he came? Another time. This time, what do we do when a convert does come? Who's left? Jerry.
Welcome.
Jerry, can you read for us source number 4?
Yes.
Okay, is it big enough?
Yeah, I can say it.
Go for it.
The sages taught in a barita with regard to the potential convert who comes to a court in order to convert at the present time. When the Jews are in exile, the Jewish court says to him, what did you see that motivated you to come to convert? Don't you know that the Jewish people at the present time are anguished, suppressed, despised, and harassed, and hardships are frequently visited upon them.
Thank you, Jerry. So, if the Jews are having such a rough time, if it is so hard, how do you say it in Yiddish? Es ist schwer zu sein a Yid. Did anyone ever hear that from a parent or grandparent? Schwer zu sein a Yid? No. If it's so hard to be Jewish, where's the garden? Where is that? Where is that? Where is the gardenness? Where is the goodness? Where is the excitement? Where's the happiness? And this is the question that the Rebbe is about to deal with right over here. So let me ask, Professor Balas, can you read for us, please, the Garden of Suffering? You're muted. We can't hear you.
I don't have it.
Okay, let me share the screen. I'm happy I downloaded it today. Here we go. Should I make it bigger?
No, this is fine.
Okay.
האמור לאל בנוגע לעניין דגני הוא
Yossi,
לכאורה...
read it for us in English, please.
Oh, you want me to read in a foreign language?
That's right. I want you to read in a foreign language for the benefit of the people.
Okay. Why don't you let the foreigners read in a foreign language? The previous Rebbe's teaching that the world is God's garden seems to contradict the Talmud's instructions for a convert. The Talmud states that when a person wishes to convert to Judaism, we are to tell him, don't you know that the Jewish people are despised and harassed? In other words, a basic condition to becoming Jewish is to know what every Jew knows, that the Jewish people are persecuted and harassed. As long as the individual withholds his conversion, he won't be subject to that fate. But if, that's good, but if he desires to convert, he must recognize and accept upon himself the fate of being persecuted, harassed, and despised. Don't these two ideas contradict each other? Why should we see the world as a garden if the Torah defines our basic existence as one of persecution and suffering?
Are you guys with me? So much suffering, such a focal point in the conversation. This is the introduction to the potential convert. And yet, the world is a garden. Is this not an inconsistency of some sort? This is the question that we're dealing with today again and again and again. The Rambam is going to be the provider of a really strong example of how to be otherwise. So what we'll do now is we'll see the Rambam's perspective as featured, as quoted from the Moreh Nevuchim, the guide for the perplexed, the guide to the perplexed. As we read through the Rambam's guide to the perplexed, you think this guy, philosopher, lived a good life. Wait till you see the next paragraph, and a bit of the background to the Rambam that gives you an impression of just how rough, just how much suffering as an individual he had experienced, and yet, what does he write in his book? So let's move into the quote from the Moreh Nevuchim, from the Guide to the Perplexed. Alan, please give us Maimonides' perspective.
On this topic, there is something amazing about Maimonides. Maimonides dedicated several chapters in the Guide to the Perplexed to tell us how we should perceive the world. Should we view it as a place where evil forces dominate and conclude that it is quite far from being a garden or orchard? Or should we view it positively as the orchard of God himself, and that despite the fact that God has many worlds to choose from, he chose this mundane and physical world to be his home? His conclusion is that a Jew who follows the dictates of Torah must view the world in a positive light, with hope and with confidence about the future, as he explains there at length.
Okay, so just before we go further, let's get a look into the Rambam's lifestyle. Okay, I'm reading this one for you guys. It's right here. It's in my notes. Maimonides' personal biography is one of hardship and loss. The hardships of his life began as a child. In 1148, following the invasion of the Almohads, an extremist Muslim group that conquered Spain and North Africa, his family was forced to abandon their hometown of Cordoba and wander between province and Spain until they settled in 1160 in the Moroccan city of Fez. The Rambam, although he was only 13 when his exile began, was nevertheless old enough to understand and appreciate the hardships of exile and the difficulties of endless wandering. He described the experience in his correspondence. Okay, that's part one. Part two of his life. Another difficult chapter in his life was the death of his beloved brother David. David was a merchant, and on one of his expeditions at sea, his ship sank. We can get a glimpse of the effect this had on Maimonides from the letters he writes about 8 years after the tragedy. And he says, "The worst tragedy of my life, worse than anything else, was the death of my holy brother, may his soul be remembered, who sank in the Indian Ocean. He had with him money and goods intended for himself, myself, and others. He left with me a young orphan and a widow. The day the news of his death reached me, I fell ill for about a year. I suffered from inflammation, high fever, and depression. My soul almost departed." Whoa. The void of David's death had a drastic effect on Maimonides. It was a devastating blow for several reasons. First of all, he was very close to his brother. But second, his brother had supported both families, the Rambam's and David's. With his death, Maimonides, the Rambam, was forced to care for David's widow and orphan, and also find support for his own family. Later on in his life, on another point, the Rambam's own wife and children all die in a plague, and then he gets remarried later on and moves. The family then leaves Fez, spends time in Akko, and finally arrived in Egypt. In Egypt, the Rambam was appointed as one of the physicians of the Sultan. His time in the palace was very difficult for him. He carried the responsibility for the health of the Sultan's family and officials, and many others who would wait at his door for advice and remedy. In one of his letters, the Rambam described the great distress and effect on his health and soul. He writes, "I returned to Egypt from the palace in the afternoon. I am starving, but the corridors are filled with Jews and non-Jews, important and unimportant people, judges and leaders, a great multitude of people all waiting to see me, and the visits continue, sometimes into the night. I speak to the patient lying on my back from great fatigue. Night comes and I am totally exhausted, too tired to speak." Wow. I'm tired just from reading all of that. That's a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, but let's continue his life of suffering. From the Sikha, from this quote from the Rebbe, we get to see a little more how he kind of straddles both edges. So we've asked Yossi, Ellen, Yaakov. We'll share the screen. Can you do us his life of suffering? There we go.
Okay. But in his correspondence, there is a letter in which he describes the story of his life and his daily schedule. It is evident that he suffered immensely even when he reached the peak of his greatness, when he served in the Sultan's court. suffered quite literally, he was, scroll down, physically weak and overwhelmed with responsibilities. Throughout most of the day, he was occupied with matters which were very distant from the matters in which he found his true passion and pleasure, intellectual pursuits. In his own writings, and especially in the Guide to the Perplexed, he extols the virtues of intellectual engagement, describing it as the pinnacle of human accomplishment. It is quite evident that this is where he found his greatest joy and pleasure.
And Michael, give us where to find
Yes.
joy.
This life of a Jew leader and guide for the perplexed is a reflection of the life of an entire Jewish people. The Torah of truth testifies that the Jewish people in our day, before the coming of the redemption and pursuit of harassment, indeed, this is even a fundamental tenet of Judaism, which must be internalized by every convert. Nonetheless, the Jewish people are commanded to serve God with joy. Since this demand for joy comes from the Torah, and it is a commandment, not only a suggestion, we must conclude that we have what to be joyous about. The Torah does not make unrealistic demands, being, as mentioned, the Torah is of truth.
Awesome. Thank you. So, now, do we have a solution? Does anyone feel like there's a solution yet? On one hand, the Torah tells us there's going to be suffering. On one hand, we're telling the convert it's a hard life. You don't want to be here. On the other hand, the Rambam, the guide of the perplexed, as a leader of the community and in such leading an example for all of us. I mean, he's leading a tough life, and he's telling us in the books, live a good life, experience life as a garden. Have we yet managed to figure out this inconsistency? Good life, hard life. How do you do it? And the previous paragraph was like, the Torah is the one that said it, so it must be possible. Is that something that's encouraging you to find a positive perspective? Like, is that lifting you up yet? We need something more. The big question that's still sitting on the table is, how can Maimonides tell us to look positively at the world if it's full of suffering and disappointment? And that brings us to section C. It's all about perspective. And I think this is really going to be a very influential coming couple pages. So, Jerry, I'm going to share the screen. Can you read for us, please?
Yes.
Section C, it's all about perspective. Off
Okay.
you go.
Okay. The answer can be derived from the opening words of the discourse, I have come to my garden. These words tell us that before we enter the world, God enters first. He establishes the world as his dwelling place, the place where his essence resides. Being that we find ourselves with God in the same home, the fact that we are persecuted or harassed becomes entirely irrelevant. During a moment of immense pleasure, a person does not notice the bite of a fly. It's not that the bite doesn't exist. It's just that he doesn't feel it because he is overwhelmed with the immense experience of being together with God under one roof. When we speak with a non-Jew before a potential conversion, he cannot yet perceive this feeling. Therefore, we must deceive him. He must be told that from a materialistic perspective, The Jewish people are persecuted and harassed. But that is only because he can't yet appreciate the power of God's presence.
Amazing. Amazing. Appa, where are we? Amazing. Just think about it for a moment. Has anyone ever heard of a schwitz? A sauna? The ultimate sauna, you sit on different levels, and as you get more ready for more acclimated into the heat, you go up to another level. And as you go higher and higher, your body is used to more and more heat until if you make it to the top, it's like immensely hot. In the olden days, in the old saunas, they thought that if you would smack a person with rods or reeds or something like that with leaves when they're in the sauna, it would be relieving or it would feel good or something like that. But the smacking, the beating, the patch doesn't start on level 1. It starts closer to the top. When it's too cold, when you're not used to it yet, nobody wants to get a patch. No one wants to smack when it's the wrong environment. But as you move up and you're more in the mode, that smack is welcomed. So much so that you might say, give me another one. When you're in God's garden, a little bit of pain doesn't hurt so much. Why doesn't it hurt so much? Because I'm overwhelmed with the goodness in which I reside. When there's so much goodness, a patch here, an issue there, or something, whatever. You manage because it's too good, so it doesn't hurt as much. In the next paragraph, it says the story of a businessman. A guy is out there doing business. He's got $1 million, and he goes and makes a great deal, and he pulls in huge profit. In another one of his streams of income, he loses $5. Do we expect the millionaire times 3 to be thrilled or to be upset about his lost $5? If he's upset about the $5, we think the guy's delusional. Like, what do you mean? You just won the lottery. Like, what's up? When you're in the presence of so much goodness, you're overwhelmed by the goodness. A little loss is not a big deal. Professor Blumenthal, please give us gain a million, lose a penny, all the way through the end.
It's like telling a businessman worth millions of gold coins that he lost a copper penny today. The man will look at you like you are a total fool. What value is there to a single penny when you know that he earned millions of gold coins in one fell swoop? But that's only true of a person who appreciates the value of the gold coins. If you can only appreciate the value of a simple copper coin and have never seen a gold coin in your life, you will only know that a coin, a worn-out copper coin, has been lost. The fact that the Jews are persecuted and harassed is only visible to the non-Jew. It is entirely irrelevant to a Jewish people, comparable to the loss of a single copper penny, while simultaneously earning millions of gold coins. Why dwell on the minor loss of a penny when we have earned millions of dollars? Why dwell on the material loss of being a Jew, being harassed and persecuted as you stroll in God's garden? In the most simple of terms, when a Jew becomes permeated with this idea that the greatest joy is to be with God under the same roof, while everything else is a mere externality, that itself serves as a source for an abundance of blessing in his material matters, with children, good health, and abundant livelihood, allowing him to study Torah and fulfill mitzvot, thereby making this world a home for God amid comfort and peace of mind. This also serves as a preparation and conduit for the imminent Messianic era. Indeed, Maimonides writes that the sages and the prophets did not yearn for the Messianic era for its side benefits. That goodness will flow in abundance, and all delights will be freely available as dust. Rather, they desired to be free to involve themselves in Torah, because in that era, knowledge, wisdom, and truth will become abundant as the waters cover the ocean bed. May this happen very soon with the arrival of Mashiach.
Really cool. Thank you, Reb Shmuel. So, that's the end of the Sikha, but that's not the end of the conversation. The conversation blossoms from here. When you're in that space, when you're in that mode, you can appreciate it. When your focus is on materialism, accumulation of wealth, a good breakfast, a fancy car, maybe. When your focus is on experiences in this world, you may not be able to value the special things and the uniqueness of God's presence. But in that fourth paragraph, when a Jew becomes permeated with the idea that that his greatest joy is to be under the same roof as God, like, what else is there? What can be valuable and important? If you can be in that, if you can put yourself into that space, then you can thrive. And this happens, it's nearly like a switch that happens, and it's strongest when it happens to the Jew who converted. Before he converted, he was told, life is hell. It's bad, it's rough, it's tough, you don't want this. And maybe he didn't want all that part. But then, as he goes into the mikveh and comes out, and now he has a soul, and now he has a piece of God in him that's pushing and pumping, suddenly now, this person sees everything differently. Now he's Jewish, now she's Jewish, and they experience how they're in God's home, they're in God's garden, and there's more to life than another dollar. There's more to life than another piece of cake. Now life is about being in God's presence. It's a completely different space. There's a story that goes along with this. There was a lady, her name was Rachel Zamir, and she was a kindergarten teacher and an educator for many years. She was in constant contact with the Rebbe, and he sent her dozens of letters regarding education and about life in general. And she later wrote an autobiography which she called Shlichut Chayai, My Life's Mission, and she wrote the following story. I'm going to give it to you, and it seems that she just passed away, so this story should be a blessing for her memory. The socio-economic situation of the children in her school were extremely difficult. Most of them were new immigrants. Some still lived in the transit camps, and it was a truly diverse group of children. There were some from Yemen, from Iraq, from Morocco, from Tripoli, from Tunisia, from Persia and India. And then there were some from Romania and Poland and Russia. Many refugees did not have a steady source of income, and the tuition for the kindergarten was 2.5 lirot. It sounds like a quarter. I don't know the value of that coin, but it can't be too much. But many parents did not pay. One time, when Rachel went ahead and asked a parent for the monthly tuition, a father came in brandishing a large knife, and he demands that she would accept his child for no pay. So I was shocked and tried to explain in a calm voice that as a city-funded operation, I was required to collect tuition. If his situation is indeed dire, I told him he should try to get an exemption letter from the city, but for now, his child can stay. The father calmed down, he thanked me, and he left. He did not end up paying tuition that year. Nevertheless, this man would wear elegant and expensive clothing, and rumor had it that he would buy the most expensive shirts. Teaching in this school had always been very difficult, but this was the last straw. After this encounter, I wrote to the Rebbe asking permission to leave. He responded a short time later with a letter he would send to the general public, and along with a little booklet which was titled Mipi Oilelim in Hebrew, which translates from the mouths of infants. And the Rebbe added in the following in his handwriting at the end of the letter. He wrote, it would be worthy to contemplate deeply what is written in the mimer regarding from the mouths of infants, and to come to the conclusion about the worthiness of their education and the great merit it is for those whom divine providence has given the privilege and joy and the riches. Okay, that's a story. What's the lesson of the story? The story in review: there's a lady who's teaching in a school. Her job is to collect their tuition. A guy won't pay tuition. At the same time, he wants to drive a Rolls Royce. She's so fed up, she writes to the Rebbe saying, I can't do this. This isn't right. The Rebbe responds to her, pay attention to the most important part. Your job is to teach another Jewish child Torah, and think about the value that person is going to take away. And compare the worthiness of teaching them versus the physicality. In a way, the Rebbe isn't telling her a new method of education, a new method of tuition collection, none of it. The insight is a new perspective. Stand on a different pedestal. From where you're looking now, it's hard. From where you're looking now, it's rough. It's a hard classroom, hard parents, hard situation. But if you put yourself on a different level and you look at the whole story from a different vantage point, you get a moment to realize and to experience and to understand just how valuable her job is. God isn't guaranteeing for us that life is going to be easy. And He doesn't tell us that life is free of hardships and pain and difficulties. But when we look at life with a perspective of, I'm in God's garden, when we look at life as God is my Father and taking care of me, everything is different. When I realize that it's all from Hashem, the hardships fall away and they don't even exist. This, my friends, is a major, major takeaway message. The world is nuts. The world is nuts. Hard to deny it. Okay, maybe I'm in denial. Maybe. But nevertheless, it's hard. It's hard. Look at this. But where am I standing? Where am I going to be? If I allow myself in to God's space, if I let God into my space, instead of seeing the world as falling apart, I can see myself in a garden walking alongside God Almighty holding my hand. It's just about how we look at it. How, my friends, can each of us change our perspective? Because this doesn't happen by itself. We need to do it to ourselves. We need to do this to ourselves. How do we do this to ourselves? One thought is, take your source notes and read them over tomorrow morning. An easy idea is, write yourself a message. Write yourself a letter. Point out the goodness in your life and recognize you've got so much goodness and it all comes from God and there's more coming to you. And then, every day, you look around and you see the goodness and you focus on it. And you celebrate it and you recognize that it's all from our Father in heaven. May each of us be blessed to only ever experience revealed goodness. We should only talk about these things in theory. This is a theoretical conversation. No more suffering. Let us all make it in good health to the times of Mashiach and enjoy the presence of God in a revealed way. Good Shabbos.
Shabbos.
Good Shabbos.
Shabbos.